Welcome to this webinar organized by Payet Reicao y Perez Abogados and the World Law Group. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm always glad to be part of spaces like this where we can share thoughts and experiences regarding the advancement of women in the legal profession, and especially in this case where our speakers are from different countries. As you know, in this webinar, we will discuss about measures and initiatives developed and implemented by law firms to close gender disparity gap and to make it feasible for women to reach a leadership position. I will first introduce our speakers and then we will start with the panel. First, we have Maria Elisa Gualandi Berri. She's a partner of the corporate and M&A practice at Tocini Freire in Brazil and member of the firm's executive committee. Maria Elisa has been for more than 15 years highly involved in the firm's diversity and inclusion initiatives, which together with the pro bono and corporate social responsibility initiatives are part of the firm's program, TF Inclusion. It's also here with us, Judith Riordan. She's a senior partner with the Irish law firm Mason Hayes and Curran, having joined the firm as an associate in 2004. She specializes in insolvency and financial restructuring matters, along with all related litigation. She has broad experience advising and protecting the interests of all stakeholders in informal insolvency processes. She routinely represents insolvency office holders in court and out of court. She also advises companies and their officers on insolvency issues and risks. In addition to advising troubled businesses, Judith frequently advises secured creditors, informal insolvency processes, and informal workout arrangements. And she has experience advising both domestic and international clients in cross-border cases across a range of sectors. She's a key contact partner in the World Law Group, a council member of Restructuring and Insolvency Ireland, and on the steering committee of the Irish Network of International Women in Insolvency and Restructuring Confederation. Also, we have Carol Barnhart. She's a corporate attorney at Greenberg Traurig Miami's office. She focuses her practice on mergers and acquisitions and other complex strategic negotiated deals, advising clients on a wide range of regulatory compliance, financing, and general commercial issues. Carol provides pragmatic legal advice for markets lacking predictability and susceptible to fraudulent activity. She also counsels clients on corporate governance matters. Carol rejoined Greenberg Traurig from packaging manufacturer Grupo Phoenix, where she served for several years as general counsel, chief compliance officer, and chief human resources officer. She also worked at PTG Bechtel-owned GlobalNet Cabo Submarinos and Diageo, the global drinks company. Then we have Susan Castillo. She's a partner in the corporate and M&A practice and head of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at Payet Reicao y Perez Abogados. She specializes in corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, civil law, banking and finance law, and capital markets. She has extensive experience in mergers, acquisitions, and sale of companies, and have participated in some of the most important casework in country in recent years. She has also participated in the major financing operations in the capital market, both locally and internationally, and has been a guest associate at the offices of Bonilla Menendez in Madrid and Beijing. And last but not least, we have Fernando Sorek. He's the CEO and head of the litigation and arbitration practice groups in Tocini Freire. Fernando has broad experience in litigation and international arbitration involving real estate matters, complex financial contracts, and a wide range of administrative law issues. He has worked on major international arbitrations in Brazil, USA, and Europe. Graduate of the Law School of Universidad Presbiteriana Mackenzie, and holds a master's degree in civil law from the Law School of the University of Sao Paulo. He's also chair of the AmCham Arbitration and Mediation Center's Advisory Council. So now I will leave you first with Fernando, who is going to do some opening remarks.
Thanks a lot, Julia. It's a great pleasure to be here. First of all, I want to thank World Law Group, Payet, Ray, Calvi, and Perez, and Maria Elisa my partner, for the kind invitation to speak briefly about being an ally at work. And let me explain why I am here. I'm here because of Maria Elisa. Maria Elisa, in fact, is Maggie for me because of the short version that we use in the office. More than 10 years ago, she told me that it would be very important for me to be involved in our inclusion initiatives, not only as a member, especially as a leader at the law firm. And my first task was to speak in an event about, we were entering into an organization that is related to the rights of LGBT people. I had to research a lot to be at the event. I was afraid to make any big mistake. Let me say that I'm a little bit more comfortable now. I don't think that I'm going to do something wrong here, but pay attention, please. And it was funny because my value at home has increased a lot after this event. In fact, I was speaking with my daughters and that I would speak in an event about equality, about inclusion, about LGBT. And my younger daughter said, finally, you're going to do something important in your life. And it was true. It was true. So I thank Maggie for being in this path for the last 10 years. I will quote an article from Carly Hawk that is, the title is 9 Tips for Being a Male Ally at Work. Allyship is important in making sure that everyone is not only invited to the table, but also be heard, acknowledged, and recognized for their contributions. And very briefly, the 9 tips are declare yourself a male ally to yourself and your team. Be mindful of your bias and embrace a growth mindset. Go to the source, so ask women, non-binary people, people of color, and other less dominant groups how you can help. Cultivate supportive partnerships with women and less dominant groups. Speak up and call in other people if you see that them abusing their power with others. Step back so others can step forward. Model different ways of being and be mindful of the way you communicate. I think I mentioned 8. The 9 is understand the impact of your words or actions have caused in the past. Take responsibility for them and course correct. So that's my opening. I hope you have a great event. I'll be here watching and learning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for being with us today and for your opening remarks. And now I will leave you with Mayra Aguirre. She's a principal associate of our firm, and she specializes in energy, regulatory, and administrative law. And she's a member of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and she's going to moderate our panel.
Thank you, Julita. Well, we're going to start with the questions for our panelists, as well, they are top-notch, not only in their field of practice, but also in diversity and inclusion subjects. So, well, the first question would be for Carol. So, well, gender equality is a relevant and substantial issue for governments. So we are aware that in some jurisdictions, governments have been working as side organizations to impose measures that can address gender disparity. In the case of the United States, what are the most relevant policies or regulations passed by the government? And could you describe how does these policies work and whether they have any measurable results?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for hosting and having taken the time to really provide the space for have a conversation and continue to ensuring that our voices are heard and that we're at the table. So thank you for the forum. With regards to the question, in particular in the United States, we've led for quite some time in legislation, federal regulation, state regulation. We have things like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. We have Equal Pay Act of 1963. We have other acts that have been enacted to help bridge the gap in gender equality and equal pay. Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1975, I believe it was. So we do have a lot of regulation, both at the federal and at the state level, that has come into law since the 1960s and the Civil Rights Act movement till very recently, as recent as the Obama administration, again, geared to protecting the rights of women and equal pay. However, those legislations simply provide the avenue for people to sue, for people to enforce rights, for people to have to pay if they don't play within the ball game and what we believe is equal and equitable. They provide that framework and they empower people. However, I think the most important, as you asked, measurable, what has these types of legislation really delivered in terms of measurable results? I believe with that, all the regulation and the legislation that has come out there since the 60s, really what it does is empowers people and companies to really have focus on women, and making sure that the rights are heard and that women are actually given equal footing with men in the workplace. I think it's most importantly, it's created leadership in corporate America and in the law firms to ensure that from the top down, women are at the table. I don't think without that legislation, people would have realized how important it is and how much diversity it brings and the actual positive results that come out of it in terms of the bottom line of corporate America. So that the legislation has been there. I think over time, it's provided an avenue and it's opened doors for women to have the time, to have the exposure, to have the better pay. And we still have to go in that area, but I think it's important that the legislation has empowered our leaders to actually have a top-down mentality when it comes to women and equal pay and having senior positions and being in executive committees. And it's provided that avenue.
And maybe, Carol, I can comment on that, because based on that, clients are being so much requested to fulfill these rules that they request us firms to fulfill the rules as well. So we've been receiving mainly from the US clients here in Brazil, in the capital markets, banks, multinationals. They request us to fill in many forms about diversity. And we've been seeing more and more clients ask us, okay, in beauty contests, for instance, we were very successful in a very big project. And afterwards, the clients told us, that we won because we were the team with more diversity when we presented ourselves in the beauty contest. And I agree, yes.
No, sorry, go ahead, Marilise.
No, and I agree that the rules, they kind of help things move.
They do.
Those that do not do things genuinely, at least they go and try to do something. In Brazil, we have rules as well. We have the rule for a citizen company. We apply for that. You move maternity leave from 4 to 6 months, paternity leave to 20 days. It's affirmative actions that help things move.
Right. And when especially with respect to clients and law firms in particular, We've seen an increase. Most multinationals, I would say all of them that we have as clients, would require, if we're making a pitch for a particular job or a particular deal, that the deal team is diverse, but more importantly, that the people who are actually running the deal are women or other type of minorities, not just a picture in a pitch book, but the person that's actually leading the deal. And that, I think, is a result of very empowering legislation that has had the effect on leaders in our communities. And I believe that that actually makes a difference to the bottom line. And so that trickles down, and that's where we are today based on the various legislations.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol and Maria Elisa. I think those were excellent answers. And actually, it is interesting to know that it's not only relevant to have the proper legislation, but also I think the drivers for enhancing equality have actually emerged from the companies and workers itself. So I think that's what we can take out of your answers. So now moving on, well, Judith, the next question is for you. So can you tell us, for a diversity program to be successful, it has to be embedded at every level of the business. However, when it comes for large organizations, such as multinational firms, that could represent quite a significant challenge. How does Mason Hayes work towards engaging everyone on gender equality policies?
Thanks, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Look, I think it's a fair observation, especially for larger organizations. And there's certainly no point in having detailed policies that take a long time to prepare, but that ultimately sit in someone's desk and nobody's aware of them, and more importantly, implementing them. So in MHC, we have a diversity committee, and it has various pillars, one of which is gender equality. As a starting point, the head of the committee is a man, a senior partner, and he drives these initiatives. So I guess that's a good start. The committee is made up of various fee earners, from the most junior to the most senior, along with representatives from business support units, so non-lawyers. So in terms of engaging everyone on gender equality, we don't really have anything prescriptive in terms of process. We don't have quotas for promotions or the intake of trainee lawyers, but it's certainly a focus for the firm, and it has been for some time. And I think our results, for the most part, are reasonably good. So I just took a few of our stats, not to bore people with stats, but focusing on the positives. First of all, 66% of our total staff of 550 people are women. 61% of our lawyers are women. 71% of our senior associates are women, and 39% of our partners are women. But then if you move into our equity partnership, there's only 6 of us, and the balance are 22 men. So that makes it a 21% female representation at equity level. So, it's clear the more senior we go, the female representation reduces. But that said, I think the landscape of our equity partnership probably distorts our story a little bit. We have a few examples. Our first female managing partner was appointed in 2007, excuse me. And our current chair is also a woman. And we've had female representation on our management committee since the 90s. Just a very small anecdote, when I joined MHC in 2004, there was one other firm in Dublin where women had only been allowed to wear pantsuits in the previous few years. That's something, yeah, that's something that would be unheard of in Mason Hayes & Curran. In general terms, it has always been very progressive. I think also there can be a perception sometimes that it's always women driving gender equality issues, but one quite simple strategy that we deploy is we have men at our women's events. For example, we do a lunch on International Women's Day, and we have guys from our office there, and it's something that clients often recognize as distinct from other firms. Again, simple example, we're a supporter of the 30% club, and across the firm there's lots of representatives on practice group specific women's organizations. Carol and Maria Elisa have already touched on this, but we're very aware that clients expect to see women lawyers on their legal team, and presenting a team of men kind of stands out these days. But for us, it's never a case of a token woman. Carol, I think you alluded to that in your pitch document. We don't just put a woman in there to win a job and then the client never sees her again. We have a large pool of senior women lawyers who who lead their teams on very significant cases and transactions. And maybe just a personal observation as a last point on the issue, I never even considered that my gender would hold me back or impact on my progression in MHC. So, I think the environment in the firm demonstrates that I saw paths to progression from a very early stage when I joined MHC nearly 20 years ago. And look, we're not perfect, there's no doubt about that, but I think we do a reasonably good job of having everyone engaged on the gender equality issue, such that, in some respects, I'd like to think that it isn't even really a significant issue in the firm.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I agree, and I think that what can I highlight from what you have said is that actually it is important not only the policies itself, but also to be sure that gender equality is part of the discussion and the culture of the firm. So I think that's the case for Mason and Hayes, and well, for all the firms present here. But well, anyways, let's go with Susan. And now, can you tell us, when looking to engage with D&I, specifically with gender equality, companies often start with their policies and processes. And this is clearly an important part of any initiative, but sometimes firms might falter or lack confidence in how to implement this initiative. At Payet Reykawi, how do you approach this? How do you ensure that implementations of policies leads to substantial and measurable change regarding gender equality?
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to all these great panelists for joining this event. As it has been mentioned in this webinar earlier by Carol and by Marilisa, rules help things move. And it's great to have policies within the firms and countries. But I think it's also very important to work in the implementation and in the positive impact of those policies and rules within the organizations. In our case, well, for instance, we continually share our D&I policies within and outside the firm. From time to time, our diversity and inclusion committee sends reminders to our members of the policies that we have and the different benefits that we have, and as well as any updates to those policies and benefits. Our human resources department, as well as some partners of the firm, also are in constantly contact with the members of the firm to remind them of the benefits that we have and to encourage them to use such benefits, such maternity and paternity leaves. Additionally, we have conducted many times mini surveys or polls to determine the usefulness of our policies or whether they need to be adjusted to meet our member needs. We constantly organize webinars and panels, such these ones, for both female and male employees, which aim to evidence the gender equality issues that our societies have, and to show that every person in the firm, in the society, can work to create a more inclusive environment. Also, we have been gathering metrics to assess the fulfillment of our policies and how our practices and events reach our members. For instance, after the conference or panels that we organize, we conduct informal survey to find out how many people participated, whether we reached the public we were targeting, or whether participants found the event useful.
Great, thank you, Susan. Before we go to the next question, I just want to remember everyone in the audience, if you have any questions for our panelists, there is a box in the Zoom where you can write your questions, and after we finish with the panel, then we're going to jump on the questions. Carol, when it comes to retaining talent, most organizations have as a core value meritocracy. However, this can collide with undertaking specific measures for retaining women talent. How does your organization is working on this, and how does your organization have tackled this issue?
Thank you, Mayra. So we have at Greenberg, we have tons of programs that are geared towards ensuring that we not only recruit but retain women at an associate level and a partner level. We have what's called the GT Inclusive Mentor Program, where we ensure that our associates, our women associates, and other minorities, it's not specifically geared only to women, but minorities generally and the LGBTQ community. They are paired up with other more senior associates. And then we have also a responsible shareholder or partner program where we have partners who are assigned to people who are a minority, whether it's African American, whether it's women, whether it's LGBTQ community, to ensure that they don't fall in the shuffle of everyday life, that they're getting assigned to deals or to cases, or depending on the whether it's litigation, corporate, that they get assigned to cases and clients that are good projects to make sure that we foster that type of mentor environment. And we have a whole host of other initiatives within the firm. But I think what really matters in not only recruiting, but retaining women in our firm is the culture that we promote. We have an open door policy. We ensure that we have the flexibility necessary on a daily basis to ensure that women out there can juggle life, not just men and women, but that women usually, as I had mentioned before, we have a lot in our plate. We have a family, we have business, we have clients, we have a husband, a wife, or a partner. And so what we ensure we do is that we lead by how we live our life. And so that our culture in our firm is such that we are flexible. I value having dinner with my family every day at 6 p.m. So I leave so that I can be there at 6 p.m. And then I, log back into the calls in the daily lives. But we have we give each other the openness, the space, and the flexibility on a daily basis. And that is our best way of retaining and recruiting women, because they see it in everyday life. And so they refer to us to other people. I've personally been in a deal where we had a woman in the other side who was a senior associate in a big law firm in New York. And she was so impressed with our culture and how we handled ourselves as women in a team that actually let's put it this way, today she's a partner in our New York office. So I think there's a lot we can do, obviously, but I think the most important thing is living it on a daily basis and being a beacon and an example as to how is it that you want to be treated, treat others the way you want to be treated. And so that goes obviously for both men and women, but in our firm, we've made it a very conscious decision to make sure that women are not left behind.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think once I heard this, like, not only to promote the change, but to be the change. And I think that's actually important. And well, Judith, in the case of Mason Hayes, which measures it considered to be the best for retaining women talent and to make possible for women to advance in their careers?
Yeah, so I think retaining women and ensuring they can advance in their career are perhaps slightly distinct points. Dealing first with progression, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any issue recruiting and training women lawyers, and every year more women enter the profession in Ireland than men. But it can be seen from the numbers that once we look at the partnership, the number of men clearly outweighs women. It's probably a bit of a cliche, but I think it often holds true that women are less inclined to self-promote than men, and regrettably, sometimes the one that speaks up the loudest will get the most attention, even if unmerited. And I think we probably all have some examples of that, which we don't need to go into today. But like Carol, one way in which we have sought to mind our women lawyers, and again, it's not just our women lawyers, but is through a mentor program as well, where junior lawyers are assigned to a partner whose role is to guide them through the upcoming stages of their career, whatever stage that might be, to make sure they know what is expected, what steps they need to take to achieve promotion, and so on. And I think even at its most basic, sometimes I find that women on my team, they don't even express a desire for promotion. But again, MHC is more about behaviors than policy documents. And in that context, I think the most important thing is that the people in our organization can see promotions at all levels. I don't have numbers on this, but we've lots of promotions to senior associate and to partner, while you know, women have been on maternity leave or just back from it, or even back from several maternity leaves. And we have a large number of people who are promoted to partner who work, you know, reduced hours, such as a 4-day week or mornings only. And, you know, I think the message that, you know, has been made clear, and it's not necessarily something that we intended to make clear, I think it is just a result of how we have approached things over the years, is that promotion isn't all about billable hours and fees, and that you're considered in the round for your contribution to the firm. And, you know, as I said, this has been recognized as partnership criteria for many, many years. But obviously there's more to a legal career than promotions, which, you know, they're just points in time, I guess. And retaining women lawyers is something that, you know, it's obviously the right thing to do, but it's also sensible from a business perspective, as, you know, there's no point investing time and resources in training people only for them to leave, you know, for another firm or go in-house, you know, when they're 5 or 6 years qualified. So, you know, flexible working can definitely be of benefit to women, but also to everybody. And, you know, it's something that we've embraced. But, you know, thinking a bit further than flexible working, engendering loyalty and making the firm a place that women want to work in, I think is really important, and maybe just as important to promotion to partner, because, you know, that is just one aspect of a long career. And I was speaking to the head of our human resources team in preparation for today, because I have to confess, I'm not an expert in gender equality issues. And, you know, she mentioned to me that, you know, broader issues that affect women need to be considered by us, such as, you know, those going through fertility treatment, surrogacy, miscarriage, menopause, and so on. So these are all aspects that we plan to look at to make the firm a better place for women. My last point on this, and I think it's something that, you know, we need to recognize, and I think it is something that perhaps is overlooked, is that many women don't have children for whatever reason, by choice or otherwise, you know, including those that are simply yet to have children if they're in their mid-20s, for sake of argument. So I'm a strong advocate that, you know, gender equality cannot simply mean focusing on making a difference to working mothers, and, you know, for example, only recognizing that time off must be linked to childcare responsibilities. And I think that's a trap that, you know, people can accidentally fall into, and I think it's something to be avoided.
Good. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Carol. I think it's, well, what you both have said, it's well, actually important, and well, yeah.
Let me interrupt for a second. Just following up on what Judith said, it's really important when you have mentorship programs, especially when you have a partner women. I have about three different people that I mentor here at Greenberg, another fellow younger partner, and 2 women associates. And I think it's important that some of them are very driven innately, and so they will ask for, you know, additional pay, or they'll be, you know, some of them are very aggressive in their very nature, and that's fantastic. But there's others that you have to, as a senior partner, you sort of have to guide them on how to behave, how to express themselves. And many times I've had this conversation throughout the years with women, younger women, who feel the need to apologize every time they speak and say, I'm sorry, but I need this. And, you know, there's a few things as a mentor that you can do to ensure that they have the wherewithal and the gravitas to conduct themselves in sort of a boardroom, if you will, or in a boardroom with a client, so that they are taken seriously. And so that's also very important from a mentorship perspective, Judy. Apologies, go ahead, Maida.
No, it's actually a good point of view. And, you know, I think it's well, it is important to acknowledge the differences, because sometimes as women we face some, well, you know, we lack sometimes of confidence. So as you mentioned, Carol, it is important to have some guidance. And when it comes from another woman that now has a higher position, it is also important, because it can become a role model for younger associates, so it is relevant. And the other thing that I would pick is what you did mention about, you know, like regular issues that women face during their life, because you can have fertility treatment, you can go with, you know, maternity and miscarriage, and some things that actually have never are discussed, but they do happen. So yeah, it is important that when it comes to create policies, we are like companies and firms are aware of these issues that sometimes are not visible, but that women actually face in their daily life. But anyways, Maria Elisa, please, you know, breaking the glass ceiling is one of the goals when it comes to gender equality. Does your firm have a specific take on measures to assure that women take on leadership roles? For example, having gender quotas at partnership?
Yeah, I might sound a bit repetitive because we don't have quotas, just like Judith said in her firm, and just like Carol said, but we have a lot of examples. And we do believe that the D&I is so embedded, it's so in our culture for so many years now, that the women's accountability and the allies that we've been having throughout the years and the team support, that was what helped a lot. And I will give an example that is my example because I was hired as a senior associate 22 years ago here at the firm, exactly the age of my daughter, because I was pregnant. So in Brazil, 22 years ago, that was not usual at all. So that was a first sign of how different the firm was. And I was made partner when I came back from the maternity leave, which I took because it was not usual at all for partners to have maternity leave. So these kind of things lead to the examples that, and as Judith said, we need to think about women not only as mothers, and they are single, married, not married, have kids, do not have kids. But usually the examples, they talk about maternity leave because this is something that the associates most of the times are taking a look at. Is this possible or is this not possible? And when it's proven that it's completely possible, just as Judith mentioned, I remember at least of 5 that were made partners here, either pregnant or coming from maternity leave, whatever. And one of them we have now, so the result of that is that we have now a high percentage of women in leadership, like 42% of partners. Our executive committee we have 7 members, 4 of us are women. And one of them, I am at the executive committee, but there is one young partner, and she was made partner years ago, and she was coming back from maternity leave. She's also at the executive committee now. And she was the partner, and we were celebrating at the committee this year because in our partners remuneration, we have a piece that is a bonus, and the highest bonus this year was hers. So, I mean, when you have this type of example and you have like women leading practice groups, women leading foreign desks that we have, it comes to be normal. Like the associates take a look at that and see, okay, I can have a career here. And this goes beyond the firm. It's not something that is inside. People from other firms, the students, they acknowledge that, and for attraction and retention, this is really, really positive. So we don't have quotas, but leading by example makes a lot of difference.
Great. Yes, well, that's what we have been actually saying throughout the webinar. Now, Susan, what other measures would you suggest for law firms to be undertaken for making feasible to women to reach a leadership position?
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, I think like there is a lot of discussion about quotas, and probably many organizations do not consider necessary to use them. But an alternative, I would say, would be to establish like kind of goals for the organizations to have from time, like in the future, in a short term or middle term, like for instance, a percentage of women associates, a percentage of women participating in committees, as Maria Elisa has mentioned, and to evaluate whether those goals have been achieved in the periods that were established, right? So when you make that evaluation, you can see whether there is a problem in inclusion in your firm, whether you need to work further in your culture to break this glass and to break these gender inequality issues. Also, we consider, as Carol and Lisa had mentioned, the creation of sponsorship programs for young female lawyers. And it's very important that in these programs, you have the participation as sponsors, as of partners, counsels, or very senior associates who should be in charge not only of the mentoring of this person, but also of promoting the career of his or her sponsee. Also, it's important to encourage the participation of women lawyers in those kind of mentor programs, even without the firm, like in other academic groups or with other firms. We could also suggest to implement flexible work schemes, but as you did mention, not only for parents or mothers, but for all the associates in the firm, because sometimes difference create a complicated environment, I would say, and it's not the case that only mothers need a flexible time or need like a good balanced work life, right? So we will also suggest, and even when this is kind of obvious, but it's important to do it, to empowering female lawyers by involving them in complex transactions and giving them leadership roles in those transactions. Also involve female lawyers in internal committees or groups which work in matters related to the management of the firm, its culture, or its organization. This is very important, not only because having diverse groups, it's enrich the discussion, but also because this gives female associates a business view and also the opportunity to gain experience in identifying the needs and failures of the organization and to contribute in working in correcting such failures.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, well, that's what we have been actually discussing with the whole group. And I think that Carol good at on that. And I also want to ask you, like, well, in addition to unconscious bias, women also face disparity in payment. So do you consider this to be a current issue in law firms? And if so, how does your firm address this relevant yet sensitive issue?
Right. Thanks, Myra. Before I go to that question, just another, I know a lot of firms don't have quotas per se, as we were all saying. It's about the culture, it's about results and what you see. One, which I think it's great, at least because what's not measured it also doesn't happen, right? So, and we're all business people as well, in addition to being lawyers. So one thing that I'm very proud that we have here is we've abided by the Mansfield Rule since 2019. And so that particular, at least it gives us a benchmark, even though we don't have a quota per se in terms of when people are being made partner, we do recruit at a minimum, it has to be 30% of all the people we recruit have to be women, period. And then from there on, you go through the recruitment process. But I think at least that the Mansfield Rule gives us a benchmark and a minimum basis from which we achieve to obviously do better. But and as the Mansfield evolves, the Mansfield Rule right now, I think it's at 5.0, where we're trying to get to even a higher standard in all of our recruiting efforts, not just partners, associates, but also staff. But going back to your question, Myra, regarding pay, in my experience in the law profession, at least here in the United States, the compensation for associates it's essentially published, and it's very competitive, and it's published both from a base salary perspective and in terms of the ability to earn bonuses is very tight. It's paid is based on billable hours, and so I would say, at least in the world of the law and law firms, there's really no disparity of pay at the beginning of people's careers. I think if we're not conscious about ensuring that women are empowered, are retained, have faces in front of clients, have the ability to be in the boardroom, continue to do business development at the same level that men do, and are in front of clients so that they develop business, so that they have their own clients and have their own deals and run their deals. The gap in pay at law firms at the partnership level could differ. And so we have to always we have checks and balances at Greenberg to ensure that, generally speaking, women have the ability to run deals, because the compensation scheme in each firm is different. But for partners, it's based on, deals that you've made, collections, time, and there's a lot of components that go in there. And that's where I think, because it's not so dry and black and white and cut dry, the possibility or the ability for a disparity in pay could affect people who've decided, you know what, I don't want to, I don't want that for me, or I don't see myself as leading a deal, or I don't have the ability as a woman to do A, B, and C and lead a deal, which is usually, and I'm obviously speaking from a corporate perspective, that's what I do, but from a litigation perspective, it's the same thing. If you're not the leader of a particular litigation and you're the lead lawyer, then your compensation changes. And so I believe that's a big watch out in firms. Again, as you go up, I think still we have a big gender discrepancy and pay, and a big gap in corporate America, however, because even though we have a ton of legislation that I mentioned before, Equal Pay Act, etc., I think there's a lot of companies in the US, big corporate America, where you have a senior VP that can be paid anywhere. The range is a really big range. So you can have a senior VP starting at $100,000, and you have another senior VP in this very comparable role making 3 times that. And so that is really incumbent upon the companies and the CEOs and the boardroom to ensure that gap is actually properly managed, and to ensure that men and women who are in similarly situated positions have the ability to make generally the same amount of money. But at least with your question, which was geared to law firms, I think we are in a good place, at least in the US, from the early on until you become a partner. Then after that, we have to be careful and ensuring that we actually and consciously make decisions to ensure that women have the ability to make as much as men.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. Yes, well, yes, I actually agree. And I think that thing that I would pick up is that you mentioned that there is transparency in regard of the payment that everyone gets in the firm. So actually that makes feasible to know whether it is disparity or not. And the other thing that it's very important is to give or provide the tools and prepare women to face this kind of like challenge when it comes to lead teams and, just become part of the most, senior positions. But it was very interesting discussing this. And now we're moving on to the next subject, which is related to the pandemic. So, Judith, during the pandemic, we were required to adapt to new work conditions. Would you consider that COVID posed an impact, either negative or positive, for women advancement in their careers? And did your firm pursue any measures in regard to those impacts?
Yeah, so just going back pre-pandemic, we never had a culture of presenteeism and the need to be seen to be at the desk at midnight, or else you're not working hard. We just didn't have that. And, we've always recognized that some people work, they thrive working early to early, or others late to late. And, domestic commitments sometimes take you away from work during the day, and, that's always been fine. But I suppose that said, while we were flexible, the majority of people pre-pandemic were office-based 5 days a week. So literally just prior to the pandemic, we were about to implement a remote working policy, as, it seemed to be important to a lot of people, but, particularly women. And, we agreed that it was something that should be implemented. But remote working was largely untested at a wholesale level at that time. And, with the benefit of hindsight, I think the policy was probably a little bit rigid, as, you know, for example, if you wanted to work remotely a number of days a week, you had to pick which days you were going to be at home and which days you were going to be in the week, or going to be in the office. And also you had to, you know, where relevant, you had to demonstrate that appropriate childcare was in place. But then March 2020 hit us, and we all found ourselves, you know, in our home offices or kitchen tables or wherever we might have been. And, you know, 2 years on, certainly I, and I think the entire MHC partnership, are converts to remote working. And, you know, as a result, our strategy now is that nobody's mandated to come into the office. Everyone's allowed to choose what works for them. Although that said, some time in the office is encouraged for the benefit of, you know, team morale, junior learning, and so on. But I think crucially, if you're not at your desk, that's completely fine now, and there's no perception at all that you're not fully engaged and working hard. So I think overall, I think, you know, remote working, whatever way works for the individual, is a huge benefit to all, and, you know, especially those with any kind of domestic commitments, which tends to be women. So, you know, I think broadly speaking, it's been extremely positive. On the negative side, I think probably the visibility issue is something that needs to be monitored. I recall at a webinar, a World Law Group webinar, actually in the early days of the pandemic, someone saying that, you know, when things get back to normal, and none of us knew what that was at the time, that if we retained remote working, you know, if you're in the office, are you going to give the piece of work to the associate on the screen or the person beside you? And, you know, I think that probably still holds true. And I think both the senior people and the junior people need to take responsibility for that to a certain degree. And, you know, there probably needs to be some recognition by everybody that in-office presence is important to a greater or lesser extent. I know one firm in Ireland is mandating that all lawyers must work remotely a number of days a week, so that, you know, a perception doesn't develop that those who maybe spend more time at home, or at least remote working, I should say, are contributing less than those in the office. And, you know, this isn't something that MHC is currently planning to do, but, you know, I think on a day-to-day basis, as we now move into a more hybrid working week, because we're only drifting back to the office as matters stand, you know, I think we just need to be mindful that, you know, those who choose to spend more time in the office, that they don't achieve more favorable treatment. And, you know, I think that's probably incumbent on the senior people in the first instance, but also the juniors need to recognize that perhaps working 5 days at home isn't necessarily in their best interest as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like now with the pandemic, we have, well, we have seen that it's not necessary to be at the office just to, you know, be productive.
Right.
So, well,
Myra, I have a question. Someone asked a question. Are we going to wait until we finish to answer that question?
Yes, I think so. Okay. There are we have a couple of questions here regarding payment. I think that was like very hot topic here. Yeah. But yes, we're going back to those questions after we finish. Okay. So, Susan, during the pandemic, there was a baby boom. Many lawyers embraced motherhood, and many female lawyers were under teleworking conditions. Some could consider that the situation may pose a danger when it comes to promotions. What was your firm position regarding women advancement after the pandemic?
Well, talking about working from home, sorry for the background noise, but I think my neighbor is doing some work in his apartment. Going back to your question, in our firm, we consider that pandemic should not affect the promotion of female lawyers who became mothers at all. Meaning in the last 2 years, we have had many lawyers in the firm who embrace motherhood. And after the maternity leave period, they continue working remotely and growing in their careers. In fact, we were very happy to appoint one of them as a partner this year. She's actually here, she's Julia, and we're very, very proud of having her as a partner of the firm. I think COVID has shown us that it is perfectly possible to work remotely and stay connected. This webinar is a piece of that, right? Further, working from home has been seen by many as a way to keep some good work-life balance, not only for women, but also for someone who has a pet or someone who wants to spend more time with her parents or his parents. So this is for everyone, basically. So in this post-COVID world, I think we need to work on flexible or hybrid schemes, as Judith mentioned, that preserve, at least in part, such benefits and help mothers and fathers also to find a balance between their role as parents and their careers, at least during the early years of their kids. Finally, and this is with regards to Maria Elisa's point earlier, it is important to understand that in evaluating promotions, organizations need to look at the performance of the person not only during specific years, but during his or her career. I mean, regardless of maternity leave or temporary part-time schemes, in case of female lawyers who embrace motherhood, as well as should be the case for any male associate, we need to evaluate the growth and performance of the lawyer during all the years that they were in the firm, as well as their potential to contribute to the organization in the new role.
Thank you, Susan. And well, just to finalize, we have a question for Maria Elisa. So now that COVID cases have reduced significantly and many people have been vaccinated, do you consider that some of the measures taken by the firms during the pandemic should become permanent? If so, would you highlight the most relevant in terms for gender advancement?
I'll try to be brief so that we can answer the questions in the chat. But basically, I think that the key word that will be kept after the pandemic is flexibility, accountability as well, because we've seen that the associates and everybody were very much productive at home office. So I don't see that way back. And I remember that we discussed a lot with consultants how to deal with the transition, with the models. And one thing that we heard that caught my attention is it's a transition. Today will not be the same as in 3 months, in 6 months. We'll talk about it in 1 year and see how things move. But our perception is that flexibility will be, it's just how it will be designed. So we ourselves have a hybrid model, like 3 days a week at the office, but you can choose any group. Everybody's just like, no restriction about how to model that. We established the dress for your day. Okay, if you have a meeting or if you have a session in which you need to be dressed with some, in a way, go that way. But if not, you can come with jeans. Mm-hmm. So all of that is a result of the pandemic. And I see that flexibility will stay, and how it will be moderated, we will see in the next months. But I don't see us going back to where we were before the pandemic. But I think that we are almost reaching 1 hour. Maybe we should go to the questions.
No, I think it was a very fruitful discussion because we went through very different topics, and it was very interesting to have this discussion with the 4 of you. But now let's jump into the questions. Well, they are both related to payment, and one of them is, it says, in firms or countries where industry salaries are not published, how can women be sure they are being compensated at the same level as their male peers with similar experience and skill? And then the other question is quite similar but it relates to non-lawyer roles. So how are firms addressing equal pay for those essential non-lawyer roles? I'm not sure, like, who would like to answer, maybe Maria Elisa, Carol, or Judith, or Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and anyone can supplement quickly, and I'll keep it brief. I think for all the women out there that are listening to us, you have more power than you think in your hands. I think demand, advocate, and interview and seek firms that have objective standards. Okay, firms need people. We're not objects. Firms need people. And for a firm to be successful, if they have a bad reputation in the market for being unfair, for being here or doing this, or overpaying men and not paying women, eventually it catches up to them. I've seen it happen with smaller firms in Florida, let's say. Firms that are not objective, that are not fair, that keep sort of like to the elite few the compensation structure, they fail. And they have, and I've seen them wean down to a handful of lawyers from big law firms. So I would say exert your power, demand pay, and demand objectivity, because with objectivity comes equality and pay.
And may I add a comment? I see less this problem in firms, as Carol mentioned, this transparency stuff. And I see more this need of making sure that the path to being a partner, if you want to become a partner, that is that path, and that the alternative career is not made for women. Women that want to go that path, take a look at firms that clearly let that. And I think that, as you mentioned, Carol, it's really thinking about sponsorship and thinking about women acknowledging that it has the power to move. It's indeed taking the advantage of putting her career in a track.
Right. Agreed.
Great. Well, if Susan, are you going to add on?
Yeah, I just want to add that also, like, it is like our responsibility of partners or for women that reach leadership positions, also to assure that in their institutions there is this equality in payment, right? So there is some work that we also need to do if we identify that this is a problem in our organization.
Yeah, actually that's true. And you know, from my perspective, what I would say is just to speak up, because in my case, whenever I had a doubt in regard with my payment, instead of, you know, just doing the chit chat and talking to some other peers, I went straight to the people in charge of HR in the firm. And I was like, so how does my payment become like this? Or what did you consider? Not because I wasn't, I didn't agree with the payment, but because I wanted to know. And I think that's relevant. And even if you feel like, okay, no, I don't understand how it comes to this number, just go and speak to your boss, because or the people that are in charge, because I think from what we have heard throughout the webinar, there is a culture of, like, you know, openness and to have everyone heard. So I think that's important. Don't be afraid just because you're women, or maybe you feel like, okay, they are going to say something bad, or anyway, like, just speak up, not in a complaining way, but, you know, just to be sure that you have all the facts and that you know why you are receiving a payment or why you are receiving a specific treatment and whatever. That's from my perspective. And right. Well, Carol, go ahead.
No. We are in a privileged position. In 2022, the world has moved on. Knowledge is power. Ask questions about compensation and whatever questions you need, and take ownership. Really, for women out there, take ownership of your careers and your future, because no one else is going to do it. And we at least have the ability to stand up and speak and understand the various issues out there, and have the ability to open our voices and be heard. So I would say take advantage of where we are today in 2022 as women in this world, but take ownership of your career, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This is it for our panel, and then we have Julia, who is going to have a final words.
Thank you. I want to thank our panelists for being here today and for sharing their experiences and actions taken by their law firms in order to close a gender disparity gap and to make it feasible for women to reach a leadership position. It has been a very interesting conversation, and I think we can conclude that law firms have to implement measures and initiatives in order to create an adequate environment for the professional development of women. But having rules and policies is good, it's actually excellent, but not enough, apparently. Even more important is that diversity and inclusion matters are incorporated in the culture of the law firm or the organization. And if those rules and policies are not a real part of the DNA of the organization, they're not going to be successful. So I think some of the concrete actions shared today, and that has been successful for retaining and attracting women talent, is flexibility. I think that was mentioned several times. The engagement of leaders of the organization, I think, is crucial. Having an open door policy, providing spaces for women to speak up, implement formation programs like mentoring programs, and having good maternity and paternity policies. And we cannot forget that working towards diversity and inclusion and creating a good environment for the development, not only of women, but also of minorities, is valued and sometimes even required by clients. So I have to bear that in mind. Thank you again for our four panelists, and Fernando as well, Mayra, and all the people that has joined us today.